John, listening to you last week at the Camden County GOP Freeholder Candidates event and listening to you debate John Adler on the radio, it really seems like you're coming into your own, even though this is your first time around the block as a candidate. But I know that, being a football player who played at a high level, you tend to be harder on yourself than even other people. So, what is your own self assessment of where you're at this point as a candidate?
Well, I knew coming into it would definitely be a learning process, and it definitely is. That's as part of being a human being is constantly exercising your brain and learning new things. And this is definitely a challenge, but I think it's something that I'm ready for. It's something I've been confronted with challenges my whole life, and being a professional athlete, you're challenged every day. So it's something that I kind of fit into that mold. I mean, definitely a different subject matter, but it's something, as an American, I have a passion for, and to be able to do this and give back to my community is a tremendous honor.
A centerpiece of your campaign into the fall is going to be the tax plan you unveiled about a month ago, which includes a 15% across the board tax cut for all Americans and a 25% reduction to the corporate tax rate designed to stimulate jobs. Don't let me mischaracterize you, but you sound to me like a believer in supply side economics, just like Jack Kemper or Ronald Reagan or most contemporary fiscal conservatives. Maybe you could just spend a second, John, and tell our listeners a little bit about your fiscal philosophy before they send you down to Washington.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think when you look at the structure we have and how government is, government does not make money, they spend money. The private sector is the one that generates the revenue that the government spends. So, there's a basic principle flaw there with trying to spend your way out of a recession. You have to make it possible and have the confidence that people can go out and be entrepreneurs and start business and hire people. That's where you're going to generate your tax revenue from, and that's what we're getting away from. No one is confident in this environment and anything that's going on. They're not sure what regulation is coming down the road, and that's just holding back, the American way, the American entrepreneur and people creating jobs. And that's ultimately how we're going to get out of this, because this administration has proven that they can't spend their way out of it. And I don't agree with them on on that level that they thought they could even do that.
And that's the perfect segue to a discussion about your opponent, John Adler. He was a liberal, a terrible liberal when he was in Trenton. The guy never saw a tax that he didn't like, and now he's gone to Washington, and conveniently, now he's decided to call himself a centrist, an independent-minded centrist, whatever that means. I don't know. I wrote about that last week. I guess it's some kind of focus group produced idea. I don't know what one looks like. I don't.
Probably comes directly from one of his pollsters.
I think so, down in the bowels of the DCCC or something like that. I can, it's obvious to me, but I guess for the benefit of anybody listening to this interview, what is the contrast between you and Congressman Adler that voters need to know heading into Election Day?
Well, I think it's obvious, and I think you kind of alluded to it earlier there, that his track record is quite different of what the platform he's running on. I think most people realize, especially with the history of this seat, the fact that Jim Saxton held it for 24 years, that yes, this it's a Republican-leaning moderate district. It is not liberal, and Congressman Adler is quite liberal. I mean, he has a 90% voting record with Nancy Pelosi. He has a 99% voting record with McGreevey Corzine. It was convenient that he turned his direction there 3 days after Governor Christie took this district by 17 points and decides he's going to vote against health care to become more of a moderate and try to get reelected. Hence the term career politician pops up, doing what you have to do to further your career. I don't think that's what our forefathers intended. They intended as a representative to go down there and represent the people he realizes what the people are and what their makeup is, what the demographic of this district is, and he's trying to change his philosophy to do that. I've had people come up to me and it's like, I like what Congressman's saying, I like what you're saying. You're both kind of, in the same area. But, I know Congressman's track record in the past. I don't know what to think of it. And I tell him, I goes, well, let's not find out if he's going to turn his back on us and run back to the left. Let's get this done right and vote for a common sense conservative like myself and get the changes we need to get our country back on track.
We're talking a lot about career politicians, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think the longer those guys are down there, the more they get detached from their district, and the more they're susceptible to the influence of special interest groups. You have a term limit proposal. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I put out a term limit pledge. Man, it's probably been over a month ago of no more than 4 terms or 8 years. I think as our forefathers drafted the Constitution and put all these ideas to paper, they had a lot of amazing foresight into how this was supposed to be done. And I think the career politicians are a big part of this. When you look at it, all those people in Washington have got us to where we're at. And I think our forefathers intended that the citizen legislator go down there, make change that's going to help people back home, and not be there, a lot like Congressman Adler's doing, pandering both sides to try to get reelected instead of making change that is going to help the people back home.
One of the surprise issues thus far this year has been offshore drilling. Not something the politicos and pundits expected voters to be focused on this year. This was supposed to be all about jobs and the economy and a referendum on the president. But the BP oil spill down in the Gulf has reinvigorated a national debate about our energy policy and our approach to making ourselves, as a country, independent of the Middle East. You have strong views about the topic. Please share them with us, John.
Well, I think drilling is a part of us becoming energy independent. And I've said that from the beginning, and I've not changed from it. I've said, I believe it should be a states' right issue. It should be a 10th Amendment issue. The federal government, shouldn't, be telling who can and who can't. With that being said, Congressman Adler has been all over the place on it. Much going back to his pandering thing. He's doing what he thinks is popular. He's been against it. As of recently, right before the spill, he had said that he was for it where it was available. So he was for it in the Gulf. He has not stepped out and said where he stands on it. My stance has never changed on it. I believe, it is something we have to do. We are dependent on oil. And I think we need to become independent from foreign oil. I mean, that becomes a national security issue when you're sending billions of dollars overseas. So something that's part of, what we call an all-and-above energy plan. We need it all. We need nuclear. We need solar. We need geothermal. We need wind. So it's something we have to get off the foreign oil, and the way to do that is here on our own ground. We have it here. But I don't think the federal government should be really stepping in and saying who can and who can't do it. I really believe the voters of the independent states can really determine that themselves.
I think you're right. And I also think it shows us once again how incompetent big government can be. Regardless of how at fault BP is, and it certainly looks like they bear a good deal of the responsibility here, in the end of the day, it was a private company that capped that pipeline, not the government.
I think, too, when you look at what happened in the Gulf, there's a tragic loss of life. There's a huge impact on the environment, and nobody wants that to happen. But there are regulations in place that were, overlooked, that weren't enforced. You look at the technologies that are out there, they're available. Countries like Venezuela have them. We don't have them regulated to be on our own rigs. That's quite frankly scary because it can be safe.
Jon Runyan, it's always a pleasure. You're always welcome here at Save Jersey, and again, we appreciate you answering a few of our questions.
Not a problem, Matt. Thanks for having me on.